Ho, ho, ho! Lisa Gifford.
Linda Winter. Guess what we're doing today? Santa hats.
We're doing the Santa hats. Yay!
These are addictive. So let's get started.
So the products that you're going to need to be able to make the Santa hat is you're going to need the Martelli templates, and you can either get the small, which is more like a child size, or you can get the large. You're going to need the rotary cutters. You're going to need maybe some bells or baubles that you want to use for the top part. You're going to need fabric. You're going to need, you could use regular cotton, or you could use minky, or you could use fleece, whatever you want. You're going to need at least 18 inches with the fabric and at least 9 inches or whatever you'd want to use for a coordinating fabric if you want to be able to have a cuff. Now the hats can be made with 2 different sizes. Looking at the small, it can be made 4 different sizes, and the band is either going to be 20, 21, 22, or 23 inches. The adult is going to be 22, 23, 24, and 25 inches. So how you do that is when you measure your head, if your head is 22 inches, you add an inch so you know that you are the 23.
All right, so a Santa hat, easy enough. Well, really, lots and lots of choices. So the biggest thing is making your decision on how you want to make this and then what materials to use. This has a cuff that's been sewn on. This cuff, same thing here, it's tacked down a little bit, but we also have hats where we're going to have the cuff attached. So this is one long piece instead of flipping that up. What this gives is it gives you a longer hat. So this hangs lower on your head. Further, it's taller. So even when you're doing the largest size, by having this cuff attached here, it's going to lengthen that hat. If you've got a little kid that doesn't like things bobbling around on the side of their head, then you're probably going to be better off using a cuff that you're going to fold up. So we'll go into those details a little bit later on. I want to talk fabrics. You can see here, this is a really nice minky, Shannon, whatever you want to call it. We've got some fur, we've got some minky, we've got cotton. Lisa and I both have agreed that cotton is not really the best thing for Santa hats. It just doesn't have as much movement. So I recommend not using the cotton. Same thing with the flannel. Unless you've got a flannel that has a little bit of shape to it. Lisa, grab that hat that we have on our guy over here. And this really looks nice. And you can see there's a little bit more depth to this. This flannel here, it really does kind of hang nicely. So there's more movement to it than cotton. Christmas hats, Santa hats, they don't have to be Santa. They don't have to be Christmas. It can be fall. It can be winter. It can be a slumber hat. Remember when people wore slumber hats?
Slumber hat.
Wait, we're not that old.
Matter of fact, isn't it the night before Christmas, you know, or was it the night before Christmas they're all wearing those hats?
Yes. If you live where it's
the night
cold,
before Christmas,
that may be something. So flannel is really good, and again, it doesn't have to be Christmas. Here's one that's more Christmassy, but it's the same kind of material. I love corduroy that has a decoration on it. That's a lot of fun to use as well. Polar fleece is fun too. And again, this isn't so much Christmas. Yeah, it is, but it's different. It's not your typical red hat.
Nice elf hat.
Absolutely. Now, these guys here, these are towels for your kitchen, but guess what? This will make the small hat. And there's a little bit of texture and a little bit of pattern on there too. Here's plain old flannel. If you're making a ton of these hats, this may be the way to go. It still looks nice. There's some movement to it, so it's not going to be so stiff, and it's a lot cheaper. I love things like this. This is like the one that I have on here. It's a velvet. You can do crushed velvet, velvet velour, same as this. This just has a little bit more decoration. I went to some of my fancier fabrics that I had at home and grabbed. So I was shopping and I found this and I said, oh my gosh, this is going to make the coolest Santa hat, because all I have to do when I cut this out is fold this up. Not so much. Because there's a curve to this template. When this folds up, what you get here and what you get here and what you get here, it's got a curve to it.
Yeah, you have to have that straight edge.
It's not so much going to work. You can take this fabric and make a band out of it. What it's going to give you is warmth.
Yeah.
That's all it's going to give you. And I don't need warmth on my head, but if I lived up north, I might care for something like this. But in Florida, we're probably not going to do that. We could do a band.
Yeah.
So the twofer is really only, this fabric that I call a twofer, is really only if you want to have warmth inside, which is good. I mentioned if you're going to make a lot of these. Now, this is the biggest, cheapest way to go. This is a Christmas tree skirt, one of those junky Christmas tree skirts. If you've got to make hundreds of these and you're just giving them away, do you see how this on the back side? This is a Christmas tree skirt. I think it cost me 25 cents to make that. So those are the fabrics for the base of the hat. Let's talk a little bit about the band. What are we going to put on the band? You can see here, this is right here just a piece of the fun fur. And they sell fun fur by the yard. They sell it on a roll. Lisa's pulling over a couple here. I'm going to get these out of the way.
Wouldn't this be cute?
So that is like what Lisa has on her head. So you can buy yardage and cut it up. You can get the ones, this is yardage that was cut up, and this is like a Minky Shannon. This came on a roll, and you can see how this is going to give you a thicker cuff. This one is a narrower one. This gives you a narrower cuff. We'll show you some samples of hats with this later on. But all of those things would work really well. I like things like this. I'm going to pull this guy over. And do you see right here? This came from yardage. And this is a lot of fun. Notice too the pom-pom here. But we may want to make a pom-pom out of this stuff too. This is so much fun. And it doesn't have to be red and white. You can have fun with those fabric colors too. This is fabric. This is similar to what Lisa has, but this is by the yard, so you've got choices. This is what Lisa has on her head right here. Or no, it isn't. No, anyway, there's so many choices. I'm all confused. Now, I want to show you a few others too. These guys here, I showed this for our pumpkins, and I love the idea of this. This could be a cuff. Lisa gave you measurements. You can see that's not that long.
But
so you would have
together.
Exactly. You'd piece something like this. So that's an option. Remember, if we're doing a bunch of them, this fabric right here is just a really plush felt. You can use those and cut those up too. All right, we have one more piece of the hat, and you can see we've got a basket here. So you can buy these things or you can make these things. Lisa, talk about where you got these jingle bells.
All right, so I was at a store, and they had a sale, and they had this garland. It was just this big, huge jingle bell garland, so the sale was like 70% off. So I just bought the whole garland, and look, I've got like 12, 13 bells on here, whereas I bought these bells. I paid, what, $15 for these bells in here, and they're smaller. And I've got these big, huge gold ones, same amount, but I think it actually was cheaper. And what I liked about it was it has this ribbon. So I can use this ribbon, and I have it attached here. So
Isn't that cool?
This is just finding one, just thinking outside the box, looking at the garland, thinking, oh, I could tear that up and, you know, use it for my Santa hats.
So then there are keychains. I like using the keychains. Why? Because I already own these things. They're little pom-poms like this. If you've made pom-poms before, you can make these. Here's another pom-pom.
These are store-bought pom-poms that you find back there in the craft department.
And you can see there's not as much substance to these, but again, for a little kid that
They're
may
light.
be bothered by
Yeah.
it, this may be the way to go. So you have different colors for those.
Keychain.
Here's another keychain that's a little bit decorative. I like things like this because again, it's got that little bit of
Dangle.
the yarn, and it dangles, so you can make that dangle. So you've got lots of options.
These are picks. These are floral picks.
That's cute.
And it came with the pom-poms on here, so I could pull the pom-pom off and run a string through it, or I could clip it and I could just hang it on the bottom. So, you can find these things, or you could get your own yarn, and there's pom-pom makers out there.
Right.
Make your own pom-poms.
Right. And these guys here that have the keychains, that's like the one that I have on mine. Let me pull this off and you can see. I just left a little bit of the chain showing so you can see that dangle. I just think that's kind of a nice look to it. All right, so we need to get started.
All right, so here's my piece of fabric that I'm going to use, and I'm going to make a child-size hat today. So what I like to do is I like to see what orientation this is kind of moving. Now, whoa, I want it to kind of go down, so I want this to be the top. And I've got my template here, and I've measured to get the size that I want. And so when you're making a hat, if you've measured, you're a child and or anybody you're making a hat for, that's why I like this template, because it's custom to whatever person you're making it for. So if you measure someone's head and it measures, say, 21 inches, you're going to add an inch to that, and then you're going to cut it at the 22. Here on this child size, it starts at this, the first line furthest in is 20 inches, 21, 22, 23. So if I measure someone and their head size is 20 inches, I'm going to add an inch to that, and I'm going to cut on the 21. Because the seam allowance on here is a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut on this one here. So what I'm going to do, I've got my fabric folded, and I'm going to set this on the top here, and I'm going to slide this over to that point where I know it's going to be the 22. Got it here just at the top. It's just big enough for that. And now I'm going to just go ahead and just cut it out. And here is my piece that I'll be sewing. So I'm going to set this aside, and there's enough here that if I wanted to make a circle and wanted this to be a dangly ball at the end, you can save it for that. Now, the band can be any width that you want it to be. I'm going to show you how to do a hat where it will be longer. So I'm going to sew right sides together of the band and the hat so it lengthens it like this. Linda's going to show us how to sew it where it be right sides to wrong sides so it will be a band that you fold up. So I'm just going to take my fabric, and knowing that I did this one on the 21 inches, I need a piece that's going to be 21 inches long. And I'm going to make this band. Originally I had thought I needed to make the band to be, it needed to be 5 inches or 6 inches or whatever inches. I'm just going to do this one as a 3-inch band. And it is going to be 21 inches. So I'm going to measure 1, 2, 3. I'm going to cut this on the 8. And Minky gets a little bit fuzzy everywhere. And then I need this piece now, since I cut it on that section right here. Remember, it was 20, 21, 22, 23. I cut on the 21, so my band needs to be 21 inches. So I am going to lay it on my mat and get it to 21 inches. Now, here's another way. If you didn't want to do that at all, you could go ahead and just lay this right sides together on one end and just go ahead and sew it on, and when you get to the very end, trim it up. I think that's what we're going to do.
That's my way.
Yeah, I'm not going to go ahead and do the 21 inches. I am just going to go ahead and do it that way. But you could, if you wanted to, just cut it at the 21 inches and then match up your ends and your middles. But I found, and Linda has found it too, it's so much easier just to go ahead and sew it and then trim it at the end. The key is, though, you just got to be sure to trim it parallel, not parallel with the hat, but a straight edge. And I'll show you that in just a minute. So we're going to go ahead and go to the sewing machine. Right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and match up the edges right here in the end. And I'm not going to start at the end. I'm going to move in about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. And I'm going to start there. And you'll see why in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and get the band sewed on, but I've got it moved. I'm not starting at the end. I'm going to start about 1.5 to 2 inches in, and I'm sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to back tack. And then just go ahead and just sew this on, just following the curve around the bottom. Now when I get to where I'm about one and a half to 2 inches from the edge, I'm going to stop and back tack from there. So now I got this little bit that I've got to trim off. So I'm going to the edge, and I'm just going to cut. I'm going to follow the grain of this piece that I've got right here and just trim it off. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and now put the hat right sides together at the red part, at the red fabric, and now I'm going to stitch a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to stitch from here all the way to the point. But what I like to do, instead of going all the way to the edge of the point, I like to stop at about, I don't know, maybe about a 1/2 inch or so, because I like to leave that little bit of an opening, because if I want to put a little pom-pom there, and I can feed it through and I can pin it from the inside, that way it could be interchangeable. So I like to leave a little bit of an opening right there at the end, so I can like have something that's maybe attached to like a safety pin, and I can feed it through there and then just attach it. Or if I'm just going to sew a pom-pom on there, then I'll be able to just sew that opening closed. So I'm just matching up my edge, and you could clip or pin this if you want. And I'm just going to go ahead, and now I'm folding back the white part. I haven't even sewed it yet. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew the red, the hat part. And I'm sewing it at that 1/2 inch. And I'm going to sew it all the way down. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the cuff, and I'm going to put them right sides together, just a piece of the cuff here, and I'm going to go ahead and sew across at a 1/2 inch and sew that up, and then we'll have one more step, and then we'll have the hat done. Last thing, now I've got this sewed up and this sewed up. Now I'm just kind of putting them together, and now just where that opening was, now I've just got to close that up. So your seams kind of match up right there, and just lay this down and sew that last little bit closed, and you will have it completed. These hats literally just take minutes to make. And then just turn it right side out. There's your little hat. Now this one is where it's not rolled down, it's just folded down. Now if you'd cut if you'd cut it and you needed to trim this up, you could run this over a serger or just do a little zigzag stitch along this edge if you wanted to close that in. But this one doesn't fray or anything, so it works just fine. So that's all there is to it. So the last thing is just attach a little decoration here on the end. This is one of those projects that if you wanted to have their name embroidered onto the little border here, you could easily do that, or do some embroidery on the hat. It'd be one of those projects for simple if you wanted to personalize that hat.
All right, so Lisa just showed us how to do one style with the cuff. So basically we're doing right sides to right sides and it just folds down. We have a raw edge down here because it's nice and fluffy and it covers that up. If you wanted to do a cuff first, then basically we would have a fold here and then we would still do right sides to right sides. But when you bring that down, it's giving you a finished edge.
Just yeah, one more thing to remember, you want to be sure if you're doing a cuff where it's going to be folded down and you're not folding it over where it'd be soft, if it's scratchy, that's going to be on your forehead.
Well, guess what I have here, Lisa?
You go show the one I did that was scratchy.
So this is scratchy. This is scratchy. This is also really thick.
It's pretty.
It's pretty. Boy, how pretty is that? But that on my forehead, that on my hair, I'm going to be a mess at the end of the night. Yeah. So this right here would be better off to, again, fold it like that if you wanted to. So this is nice and soft, but I really like this on my forehead. So we're going to do that method. So Lisa, let's take our hats off and show how ours are done too.
Okay.
We've got all these hats that are done with the method that I'm going to show you. And they're all a little bit different. So this one you can see, this is finished. This is a cuff, and I've sewn those together. So that one, this guy here, I didn't have quite enough fur. So you can see how this was already tacked. I went through all these earlier, but the idea is you want to be thinking how wide your cuff is. What cuff size do you like? Furs, the trims, the minkies, you know, sometimes if you're getting it off of the roll like this, you don't have a choice on this. We've got thicker ones over there where they're much thicker. You have to decide if you want to cut that down or if you want all of that as a trim. So what we're really talking about...
This one was really wide, and we decided to just trim it in half. So we kind of spread it apart and trimmed it in half so it gave it a little bit of a thinner look.
Actually, the trick on this is you cut from the back side. You're going to look at the grain of this, the way it goes, and we're going to be basically going down here. Or our precision scissors work really well too. Just start and snip, snip, snip. I don't want to cut where I've got this very, see how this is cute?
Yeah, I don't want to cut through that.
We don't want this ugly, like, oh, they cut it in half edge.
If you're cutting it in half, you need to pull it back and then cut through here so that it lays back down. You won't have where it's just cut right there. So
and again, working on the back, you can see here. See how that's ugly right there? It doesn't look like the way it would naturally grow. So when you're working with these furs, you want to be more cautious. So I recommend that you start with like a fabric first. So even this one, this is cotton and cotton. We said we didn't like the cotton as much, but look, that's been folded up. So this is a really wide brim here, and it's been stitched wrong side of the hat to right side of the fabric, and then you can fold it up to the size that you want. So we've got our hat here. We're going to stitch this down. We're going to be adding the cuff. So we want to go to the sewing machine and do that. So we'll show you how that's done. This is basically what we're going to be looking at here. So if you see here, we've got our finished edge that's a nice seam. Down here, this is the raw edge that's showing. So when we add this on, we want to make sure that this is raw and this is finished. So that's the trick to doing this correctly. So we'll go to the sewing machine and we'll stitch that on.
Right sides to wrong side.
Right sides of the cuff
to the wrong side.
So two things for you to remember. We'll take this to the sewing machine so we have this as our guide.
Okay. All right, as I showed you before, I am going to line up my fabric so I have the right side to the wrong side, but I'm going to leave like 1.5 to 2 inch opening. Or beginning. I'm not starting at the end. I'm moving it in about 1.5 to 2 inches, and then I'm going to start sewing. When I'm about 2 inches out, I'm going to stop and back tack. This has to be trimmed a little bit. So I'm going back to where the edge is, and I'm going to follow the grain up. Remember, I had sewed the right side to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side.
Yeah.
And we want to put right sides together to sew it up. Now, you're going to want to think that you need to go this way, but no, you're needing to go this way. Because the right side of this was sewed to the wrong side.
Yeah.
So this is the wrong side. So it's the opposite of what you think. So this is the right side. So now we're going to put right sides together here.
Yes. Yep.
And you're going to sew it down about 1/2 of an inch, right, Linda?
Yeah. Oh, you know what's making it hard is we're using on the sewing a fabric that doesn't have a right or wrong.
It doesn't have a right or wrong.
If we had a fabric like this, I don't know if y'all can tell, this is the wrong side here. This is the right side here. That's so much easier for you all to see. So we basically shot ourselves in the foot, which means we've shot you in your foot too. So sorry, guys.
All right. Anyway, it's going to be good.
Real life sewing, y'all, to quote G and Sherry.
Yep. It's going to become our model pretty soon.
We just never had a catchy name for our mistakes.
Okay, so I'm almost at the top point right here, and here's the decision. I want to leave it a little bit open so that I would be able to do interchangeable like little pom-poms on the end? And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up to where I just probably have about a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch from the edge and back tack it right there. You won't be able to tell it from when I have it flipped out, but you'll be able to, slip something through there and have it interchangeable.
Now, if I knew I wanted this one in here and I wasn't going to swap it out, I would stick this inside right now, pull this out through the opening where her fingers are, and then make sure that was stitched down. So this would be permanent.
Yeah, that would be permanent. Okay, so I got that done. So then the next thing is, now we got to finish this piece. So now I'm going to take, instead of flipping it out, I'm going to go ahead and get these two pieces, put them right sides together and sew it up.
And a serger to me makes this process really easy. If you don't have a serger, you can zigzag as well. You are going to have Minky or Shannon everywhere.
Yeah, just
be prepared.
Yeah, just plan on it.
And this is where clips would help too.
Yeah, because it has a tendency to curl a little bit on you when you're trying to get your edges lined up. But you see me grabbing them? I'm not grabbing them because I never do.
When you don't have somebody watching, it's amazing the shortcuts, the things that you do that won't show in the process. But when you're on camera, everything shows and everything is critiqued.
And we all have our bad
which is a nice way
habits.
of saying something. All right, now you stitched all the way to the end there.
Yeah, because now I'm just going to Now I'm just going to finish up the sewing here. So I sewed it up. So now I've got this little hole right here where I've got to finish. Remember I had stopped the 2 inches from each edge. Then you did the hat part. Now I just sewed this closed, and so then now you'll see it's just going to fit perfectly in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew that
Now I want to add one comment in here because I always do. If this hat is too big, maybe for the recipient, you're not sure, this is a good spot to put a piece of elastic.
Good idea.
A really good, strong piece of elastic that has really good stretch to it, and give it a little bit of tension as you sew. So this is going to gather up so it will adjust to somebody's head that you're not familiar with.
All right, Linda.
Perfect, perfect.
There you go.
All right, so we have a couple options now. So this, right now, raw edge here, we've got to flip this to go right sides out. What we've got here is ugly. That's not what we want to do. So we can turn this up so that we've got this nice finished edge here. I want to get to where that seam is. And we can tell our cuff is way too big. I think this was 5.5 inches. And again, you make the decision of how wide you want that cuff to be. So we can bring this down and say, I like that, or bring it down even more. If we knew that automatically we wanted this to be half of that, see what she could have done is just stitch this over. So we had a really nice finish here.
And I've done that before.
So
too.
you can do that too, and I like that. It's just how wide you want to do that band.
Yeah.
But if we've cut it to where we don't want to fold it all the way, that's when we would just go in and tack. And what I like to do is just fold this over. You can do your guesstimating or you can do your measuring, totally up to you. But with guesstimating, I'm just basically looking at that. Do you see how I've got a little bit more there? If I want all that band here,
then I would just hold all 3 pieces, lay it under here, and just do a quick little zigzag.
I would
quick little tack.
and again, this is all just floppy, so it's hair. So I can pull that back and just, even like a button tack kind of a thing, a zigzag or whatever. I just like to put my needle down, and I basically am just holding my fabric and stitching in place. And then I would scoot it down again. I'm looking to see how wide that is. Now on this fabric, you can see this is red, more coming through than this is white coming through. So if you've got a thinner fabric, then you may just want to go ahead and do the double band. And you could do that now too. It doesn't have to have been done at the first time around. We can now just go ahead and fold those so they're even and stitch all those up as well. What that's going to give you is half of that band. However you go, this is a band that now is going to fit over the part that's on your head. So this is not going to have any impact on your forehead. It's not going to add additional length. It's not going to add that heat to you. You've still got this material that's soft, so you make the decision on how you want to have that done.
That's the cool thing about this template. There's so many different ways to come back with the same thing.
We've done so many different methods, we've gotten confused because we've tried so many different things.
It's just one of those fun templates to play with and do other things with.
So we want to show you how to do a pom-pom instead of buying a pom-pom. So we'll go back to our cutting table. Okay, so we want to put the icing on the top, the cherry on the top, whatever we want to call it.
The pom-pom.
So the pom-pom on the top.
Pom-pom on top.
Okay, so you can buy one, of course. And I have some of these cool ones that we showed you earlier, and it's like, where do you find those? They're expensive. Maybe you don't want to spend the money for it, so you want to make one. Yeah. Lisa did this one out of cotton, and again, we're not
That was just spur of the moment, quick whip up.
Yeah. And again, when we first started talking about doing this, we were talking about doing all cotton. Yeah. But Santa hats really are softer material. So I want to show you how to make your own pom-pom. So you've got a couple different options. We're going to use Martelli's circle templates. The 6.5 inch, the 5.5 inch, this is about as small as I would go, 5.5 inch.
Maybe even go bigger.
Yeah, unless for a little kid, then 5.5, 4.5. But I might even go bigger than 6.5. It's totally up to you.
Yeah.
We're going to need some of our fill.
Yeah, you need a little bit of polyfill.
The polyfill,
needle
and you probably
thread.
have already bought that. We need a hand needle and thread, or if you have your Curve Master foot, you can do a long stitch on the Curve Master, just take your time, and I would do a heavier weight thread or even stitch twice or double needle or something like that. But hand stitching, it was probably the way to go. Okay, so if we use the circle template, we basically have to fold over, and here's the problem. That I don't care how you place it, there's no way I can cut all of that stuff. So what we're going to do first is cut a square. So I've got the 6.5 inch circle, I've got the 6.5 inch square. By the way, Lisa thinks I've been coveting this. This came from, guess where?
I don't know.
The Dollar Tree.
Okay, she's been toting this around forever. Like, oh, please, you don't want to cut that up. Okay, it's only $1. Go ahead.
Where's my rotary cutter? Okay, so it's from the Dollar Tree. It's one of those hand wipe kind of things. So, you know, if you really broke it down by the yard of what you'd pay somewhere on sale, you're probably paying more at the Dollar Tree. But it's $1.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to cut. We're going to cut.
She was laughing at me every time I was saying
She was like, oh, no, I don't want you to use this good fabric. And I had to wait till we were on camera to say Dollar Tree.
I should have known.
Okay, so you can see this no-slip material is so good that this was static clinging to this.
Oh my
so
goodness.
all of you that think it's not going to work with these fabrics, oh, yes, it will.
Yes, it will.
Okay, so here's the trick. We're going to place this on, and because I have a 6.5-inch square, I have a 6.5-inch circle. So I'm lining this up, I'm lining this up. I want to get this so it's in the right direction for me, being a lefty, and I'm going to cut around. I'm just going to take my time, and guess what? It's a circle I'm going to be stitching. So if it's not perfect, it's okay. But I've cut, I'm going to move it over to the next side, and again, I'm going to my edge, I'm going to get that under my nose, and I'm going to cut that off, and I'm going to do this 4 times. What this is going to let me do is cut a 6.5-inch circle. If you like working with minky or polar fleece or batting, and you want to do circles with our circle templates, those 1/4-inch circles, this is the cheater method to do that. Okay, so what do? Running thread, stitch, 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 pull, 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 and we start to gather and gather and gather and gather and gather and gather and gather, 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 and already this stuff is starting to give me a ball. And you can see, even though it's not stuffed, it's not that big. 7.5 might be good. So you get the idea. So we're not going to take the time to stitch it up, but you get the idea that this guy here can turn into a cute little ball that you've done on your own. Add a jingle bell inside of there for a cute little sound.
Or really cheap.
You know, so absolutely. So yes, big time. Okay, so I think we have covered almost everything there is to know about our, I was going to say stockings, but our Santa hats.
The child and the adult size. So you can make them larger, you can make them smaller. Again, the sizes, I tried to keep it pretty precise, 25, 24, 23, 22. And then this one here is 23, 22, 21, 20. So those were the sizes that I had on those lines.
Add an inch for
every time you measure, add an inch. Know that some fabrics don't have as much give. So like if you're working with just straight cotton, it might not have much give. So you might have to have a little bit more of a narrow seam allowance.
And it's kind of cut on a bias a little bit. So you've got some stretch there. So be aware, it may stretch too much. So just have fun.
And there's a warning. There is a true warning. You ready?
It's addictive.
They are addictive. I swear we have made so many of these hats. They're so fast and they're addictive.
They'll make you a little bit loopy because you'll be pulling out all of, not only your old fabrics, but your clothes too. Lisa asked where I got,
it in.
Yeah, she asked where I got some of these fun fabrics. Clothing, pillows, those kinds of things. All those things, if you are kind of a hoarder / stasher, collector, then these things it's a great time for you to put this stuff together.
Yeah, this is great.
The Santa hat, the stocking, both of these kind of go hand in hand. You can do a lot of the same techniques, a lot of the same materials. Just have fun. We really want you to go play with this, and we want to see your pictures too.